Hello, Garland Nixon here, and I'm going to talk about a subject that a lot of people don't talk about much, seems to have been forgotten, but some thoughts on COVID-19, a little bit of background, etc. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here, and we're going to talk about the mysteries of COVID, and we're going to talk about it in general. Let's talk about COVID a bit. You know, a lot of people know me, and they know my background as an investigator. I've had somebody say to me, "Well, you know, Garland, you're a former law enforcement. Why should we trust you?" And you know what my answer is? You shouldn't. That's my answer. You shouldn't trust me. You should trust yourself. Do your own research. I could be anything. I could be a liar, a fraud, a charlatan. I could be a CIA bot, anything, a Russian bot, anything. Anybody who says, I got the answers, trust me, be very wary. So, no, you shouldn't trust me. Forget it. Don't trust Garland Nixon. He's probably up to no good. Trust yourself. Look into this stuff for yourself. Treat me as though you just went to CIA.gov and that you got, all lies and all manner of government related crap. Just don't trust me. Do your own research. Look this stuff up yourself. I'm going to give you some info that I found. And again, as former law enforcement, as I said, I said before, I ran a lot of different stuff, but I ran investigations. And of course, when you're investigating a crime, one of the things you want to look at is the timeline. When you're looking at anything, does the timeline make sense? Do you get any information from the timeline? Oftentimes, the timeline tells you a lot. We're going to go into the COVID timeline a little bit and see if we can glean anything from that. Let's start here. In August of 2019, right? Before COVID, look what we got here. Let's start here. Investigators are homing in on a potential chemical culprit behind the mysterious spate of vaping-related illnesses and deaths. Remember the mysterious vaping disease. Very mysterious, isn't it? Everything's fine. People have been vaping for, I don't know, long, smoking weed, doing whatever they wanted. People have been vaping cigarettes, doing everything. Then all of a sudden, just like that, mysteriously, a bunch of people started crapping out. The mysterious vaping disease. When did it start? Is that part of the timeline? I don't know, but let's look at when it started. I think you'll find this interesting. So here's the timeline. Here's where it starts. So they're talking about the CDC's looking in it, vapes, THC vapes. Here's what officials knew when they knew it. Okay, so this thing starts August 17th, right? There are 94 cases of vaping-related illnesses in 14 states. That number would grow to 200 cases in 22 states. Isn't that interesting? It's not like somebody sold some vapes in one state. Some guy made some bad vapes and sold them in friggin' Sheboygan. You got a bunch of it should be clustered, shouldn't it? Isn't it weird that just like that, August 17th, hey, what are you doing? We're looking into mysterious vaping illnesses. What do you think it is? It's all over the place. It's 14 states. Now it's 22 states, spread almost like, was it airborne? Well, I guess if it was vaping, but isn't it odd? Isn't it interesting that the mysterious vaping disease popped up all of a sudden? I mean, what are the odds of that? What are the odds that just people were making bad vapes? I don't know, whatever the case. And then just like that, mysterious vaping related illnesses, 14 states. And then all of a sudden it's in 22 states, right? So they look at it. They're looking at oils. August 23rd. The first one is in Illinois. The person was hospitalized with severe breathing difficulties, right? September 3rd. That it's Oregon. Isn't that weird? How just all of a sudden people all over the place, here, there, and just spots around just started showing up with it, right? September 4th. The FDA commissioner writes an editorial in the Washington Post, urging federal officials to take action in investigating the causes of these deaths, right? We got to look into this. So this is August 17th, it starts, and just like that, it's spreading. Now, Indiana, a third vape-related death. 65-year-old man had a history of lung disease. History of lung disease. Interesting. So his lungs were already weak. Sometimes if your lungs are weak and they're exposed to something bad, get them. September 6th. They're looking into it's a respiratory illness. Coincidentally, COVID was a respiratory illness, right? Senator Minority Whip Dick Durbin pushes sharply to act quickly. We got to get on top of this. September, Kansas, a sixth vapor-related death of a man over the age of 50, right? September 11th, Trump announces he's pushing for a ban on all of them, right? Oh, so this started. When did this start? It starts. Let's look at our date. August 17th, a mysterious vaping-related illness shows up, okay? Then we get to September 11th, 12th. The CDC released new numbers on the outbreak, 380 confirmed and probable causes, 26 states, 6 people have died. The vaping illness is spreading like wildfire, isn't it? August 17th, you get the first death, and now this mysterious vaping illness is spreading like wildfire for the next month, right? September 15th, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, we've got a ban. This is blah, blah, blah. We got to stop this. September 19th, the FDA announces it's a criminal program. So what do we have? August 17th. Let's look at this. August 17th, a mysterious vaping illness shows up. I'm not saying that it's anything related to anything. I'm just giving you a timeline. Isn't that weird? August 17th, boom, people just start dying of a mysterious vaping illness that affects their lungs and kills them. It causes all kinds of weird pneumonias and kills them. They die. And then it starts popping up here, there, here, over there, here, there. Wouldn't you think that somebody would make a batch of bad vapes and they'd go out? But like some people bought them from a dispensary. Let me ask you this. Would the dispensary sell one bad vape? Wouldn't there be all the vapes that came in that lot? Wouldn't they all kill people? It's just here, there. What do you know? It's a mystery. What a mystery, right? August 17th. But 1 month later, something interesting happened. So you got the vaping illness. That's all it is. Of course, we understand it was just a vaping illness. It was a mystery. And it popped up all over the place, and it's hitting people's lungs. And that's August 17th. There we go. We got a mysterious vaping illness. But something interesting happened 1 month later. Let's look at this. One month later, let's look at this. Vaping illness shows up August 17th. Look at this date, September 19th. 1 month after this mysterious vaping illness shows up. Mystery, totally mystery. Executive order on modernizing influenza vaccines in the United States to promote national security and health. So 1 month after a mysterious vaping illness shows up, the President of the United States signs an executive order on modernizing influenza vaccines. Let's search this document real quick, right? Because let's face it, there hadn't been a pandemic in 100 years. We wouldn't think that anybody would be thinking of a pandemic, would we? Let's see something. Let's do Command F and let's search for the word pandemic. Pandemic. Oops, wrong one. Sorry. Pandemic. Oh, God, am I ever going to get there? We go. Pandemic. Isn't this weird? 18 times. So a mysterious vaping disease illness shows up, right? A mysterious vaping illness shows up in August of 2019. 1 month later, the President of the United States signs an influenza vaccines in the United States to promote national security and public health executive order that mentions the word pandemic 18 times. Well, there hadn't been a pandemic since for 100 years, almost exactly 100 years since the last pandemic. Why would they suddenly get so concerned about a pandemic? And they say, listen to this document. Let me read something from it. Influenza viruses are constantly changing as they circulate globally in animals. Relatively minor changes in these viruses, such like gain of function changes, right? Things, something like that. Relatively minor changes in these viruses cause annual seasonal influenza outbreaks, which result in millions of illnesses, blah, blah, blah. Periodically, new influenza A viruses emerge from animals, including birds and pigs, that can spread efficiently and have sustained transmission among humans. This situation is called an influenza pandemic. Unlike seasonal influenza, a pandemic has the potential to spread rapidly around the globe, infect higher numbers of people, and cause high rates of illnesses and deaths in populations that lack prior immunity. While it is not possible to predict or when or how frequently a pandemic may occur, there have been 4 pandemics in the last 100 years. The most devastating. Wait a minute! The COVID, we're told, we're going to get into that timeline, that it first showed up in December. This is September. This is 3 months before they had any indication that COVID would show up. Isn't it weird that they were literally starting a pandemic response 1 month after a mysterious vaping disease showed up, but 3 months before we are told a pandemic started? This is the evidence. Do with it what you want, right? Okay. Somebody says it's a risky topic on YouTube. I'm simply providing data. I didn't write this. That's what it is. These are our timelines. We have a mysterious coping disease, vaping illness. 1 month later, we have a interesting executive order that says we got to make vaccines faster. If you look at this, it's faster. We got to make vaccines faster. And they mentioned the word pandemic 18 times. And these vaccines must be reformulated for each influenza season, as well as in the event of a pandemic. I mean, you go on and go on. The current domestic enterprise for manufacturing influenza vaccines has critical shortcomings, right? So they can't make them fast, limiting their utility for pandemic control. Look at this. They talk about how they do it. They make vaccines, and then they say this approach is insufficient to meet the response needs in the event of a pandemic, which can emerge rapidly with little warning because the market does not sufficiently reward speed, and because a pandemic has the potential to overwhelm. Isn't that interesting? Donald Trump signed an executive order September 19th, 3 months before a COVID-19 pandemic officially started. And all throughout the document, it talks about the problems of a pandemic and why we have to be able to respond. You keep going down. They talk about the pricing during the pandemic, estimating the cost of expanding domestic production capacity of adjuvants in order to combine with both seasonal and pandemic influenza. They got to estimate the cost for pandemic response. They got to enable the rapid and large-scale administration of pandemic influenza vaccines. Listen to this. But the IHHS, in advance of a pandemic, in order to be able to ensure adequate domestic pandemic, they're talking about in advance of a pandemic, 3 months before the timeline we are given that the pandemic showed up, but 1 month after a mysterious vaping illness showed up. That's all. I don't know what it is. And what's interesting, who they put in charge of it? They put together a task force. The task force shall be co-chaired by the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Why would you put the Secretary of Defense in charge of vaccine management, making vaccines faster in the event of a pandemic, when there was no inclination that there was going to be a pandemic? The pandemic didn't start for 3 months. It was an accident. Somebody wandered into a wet market and ate a bat, and then a coronavirus pandemic showed. You know how that happens. There's nothing unusual there. It can happen anytime, right? It's normal. But they put the Department of Defense Wouldn't you put the CDC, the National Institute for Health, Health and Human Services? Those are the people in a pandemic. But for some reason, this time they chose the Department of Defense. Now, one may say, look at it and say Dr. Fauci at one point was working with the Department of Defense on gain of function and other things. So he worked with the Department of Defense on taking coronaviruses and making them more dangerous. We know that. That's factual. There's data out there to demonstrate that. That's not some weird conspiracy theory. But the Department of Defense was put in charge of responding to a pandemic 3 months before a pandemic actually started. Man, we're lucky, aren't we? Boy, are we lucky that they just coincidentally happened to start pandemic response 3 months before a pandemic actually showed up. Man, that's weird. What a strange timeline, don't you think? We go this. Estimate the cost of expanding domestic. So they're estimating the cost of things for a pandemic response. They enable the rapid and large-scale administration of pandemic influenza vaccines. So they're preparing at that point to make vaccines for some influenza type pandemic. Why would they do that? There's no influenza type pandemic. The only thing they had at that time was a mysterious vaping disease, right? And here's what they say: HHS, blah, 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 manufacture other domestic in advance of a pandemic in order to be able to ensure adequate domestic pandemic method. Everything's a pandemic. Adoption of the domestically manufactured vaccines that have positive attributes for pandemic response. The Secretary of Defense what's the Secretary of Defense involved in this? Right? Direct the and the Secretary of Defense, they're going to direct the conduct of a study to assess the feasibility of using the Department of Defense's advanced manufacturing facility for manufacturing cell-based or recombinant influenza vaccines during a pandemic. Isn't this odd? August 17th, a mysterious vaping disease shows up and spreads all over hell. Exactly 1 month later, the President of the United States signs a document. It says, we got to do pandemic response, just in case there's one, and the Department of Defense is going to be in charge of it. Interesting timeline, wouldn't you say? Interesting timeline. Now, what happened next? Okay, August. Let's do this. Let's go month by month. August 17th, mysterious vaping disease shows up. It's all over the place, right? Can happen. You know, mysterious vaping diseases just pop up. Let's not try to make more of this than it is. It's okay. Mysterious vaping diseases are safe and effective. So exactly 1 month later, the President of the United States signs an executive document to prepare for pandemic, an influenza type pandemic. Isn't that interesting? Influenza type pandemic. We go on. So that's weird. And they put the Department of Defense in charge of it, right? August, mysterious vaping disease. September, we got to get our vaccines ready and be ready to respond to a pandemic, an influenza style pandemic, respiratory virus style pandemic. We got to be ready for that. And then Department of Defense has to handle it. But then what happened 1 month later? So we got August. Let's go a month later. 1 month later, whoa, what do you know about this? There was a tabletop exercise. John Hopkins Center for Health Security, a training tabletop exercise, right? Event 201. 3-4 weeks after Trump signs this document that says, hey, we need pandemic response. The Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security in partnership with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation hosted Event 201, a high-level pandemic exercise on October 18th, 2019. August 17th, mysterious vaping disease. September 19th, vaccine preparation response for a pandemic that hasn't, we know isn't that guy couldn't happen, wouldn't happen, hadn't happened for 100 years. October 18th, 1 month, all these are almost exactly 30 days apart, almost exactly. There's a pandemic high-level tabletop exercise in New York. The exercise illustrates where public and private partnerships will be necessary during the response to a severe pandemic. Why would they do that? Right? Experts agree that it is only a matter of time before one of these epidemics becomes global, a pandemic with potential catastrophic consequences, a severe pandemic. And isn't it odd that they said, look, it's just a matter of time before we have another pandemic? And what do you know? It was only a matter of time, like 2 months, right? 3.5-hour pandemic table-type exercises that simulated a series of dramatic scenario-based facilitated discussions, right? So they go on, right? Purpose. And look, this document, how many times does the word pandemic show up? 87 times. You go on and on and on. They talk about and here's a giveaway. Recent economic studies show that that pandemics will, not may, will be the cause of an average annual economic loss of 0.7%, right? Isn't that interesting? The next severe pandemic will cause great illness, life, trigger, major economic, social. Isn't that interesting? Right? The following person, and here's people that are involved. Well, look at that. There's Biden's assistant, Avril Haines, right? Now, let's search for another word. Let's search for another word. So they demonstrated a number of important gaps in pandemic preparedness, right? Darn it, I lost it again. Event 201, here we go, right? So we go on, their exercises, the people that are there, what kind of things? Government should provide more resources and support for the development and surge manufacture of vaccines. Kind of aligns with what Trump said, right? Governments and the private sector society. Now, let's see this. Let me see something. Here's one of the things I find interesting. Governments and the private sector should assign a greater priority to develop methods to combat mis and disinformation prior to the next pandemic response. Governments will need to partner with traditional and social media companies to research and develop nimble approaches to countering misinformation. This will require developing the ability to flood the media with fast, accurate, and consistent information. Right? So, 6 weeks before a organic, completely and totally unforeseen natural occurrence of a pandemic happened, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, John Hopkins, etc., were working on a plan to deal with a pandemic. Let me see something. Maybe there's other coincidences in this document that we need to look at. Let's search for another word, shall we? Because they couldn't possibly have known what kind, right? Could they? They couldn't possibly have known. Let's search for the word CORO. Wait a minute. Event 201 simulates an outbreak of a novel zoonotic coronavirus transmitted from bats to pigs to people that eventually becomes efficiently transmissible from person to person, leading to a severe pandemic. The pathogen and the disease it causes are modeled largely on SARS, but it is more transmissible in the community setting by people with mild symptoms. Interesting. So event 201, 6 months before a completely unforeseen totally and absolutely organic uh, um, um, uh, coronavirus pandemic that certainly was spread. I mean, the crazy conspiracy theorists out there saying it was made in a lab. What kind of craziness is that? We don't go because we know that it's a safe and effective situation here we're dealing with, certainly, but nobody could have possibly foresaw a coronavirus pandemic coming. Aren't we lucky that 6 weeks before a completely organic um, coronavirus just happened to slip out of bats in a wet market in in Wuhan, the Gates Foundation and John Hopkins were planning for where they were doing a scenario where they quote simulated an outbreak of a novel zoonotic coronavirus. And they even say, listen to this, listen to this. They talk about the scenario about it starts and they say the epidemic explodes. It is first exported by air travel to Portugal, the United States, and China, and then to many other countries. Although at first some countries are able to control it, it continues to spread, be reintroduced. There's no possibility of a vaccine being available in the first year. Isn't that interesting? Let's see where else it was. Isn't that interesting? So, put the timeline together for you again, real quick. August 17th, a mysterious vaping disease shows up and spreads in an odd way, just starts popping up all over the place, and people just die of it. You're done. You get that. August 17th. 1 month later, almost to the day, Donald Trump, the president, signs an executive order that says we got to get ready for a pandemic, flu-like pandemic. 1 month later, almost to the day, Gates and his crew do a tabletop exercise, deciding what they would do if there were a coronavirus pandemic similar to SARS. A coronavirus pandemic similar to SARS. Let's continue with the timeline. What happens next? Timeline, New York Times. A timeline of the coronavirus pandemic. The coronavirus, which surfaced in a Chinese seafood and poultry market in December of 2019, has spread to nearly every country, blah, 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 blah. Timeline. December 31st, Chinese authorities treated dozens of cases of pneumonia of unknown cause. Okay, December 31st, Wuhan, China confirmed that health authorities were treating dozens of cases. Days later, they identified a new virus, right? So it was the end of December when this thing showed up. They were monitoring to prevent the outbreak from developing, right? So it looks like, now I've seen, let me try this. When did COVID start? I'm going to search that real quick. Let's go to Wikipedia. They're always right. The first human case of COVID-19 occurred in Wuhan, People's Republic of China, on or about the 17th of November, 2019. The first human case in the United States. Okay, so according to Wikipedia, and we trust Wikipedia because, they're here to help us. They're telling us the truth. They wouldn't possibly lie. Respectable, honest, and gentle people. Wikipedia is safe and effective. Don't you forget that. Since you're watching this on YouTube, do not forget Wikipedia is safe and effective, and they're doing what they can to help us and protect us. That's weird. So, to the date, Think about this. August 17th, mysterious vaping disease. Almost 1 month later to the day, Donald Trump signs a document. Hey, we got to get ready for a response to a pandemic. Almost 1 month later to the day, Bill Gates and crew say, hey, let's do a tabletop exercise for a coronavirus pandemic, like SARS or something like that. Almost 1 month later to the day, they tell us that the first human case occurred. The first human case showed up. To the day. To the day. August 17th, September 19th, October 18th, November 17th. Man, aren't we lucky people that our government somehow, some weird kind of way, our government began a response for a coronavirus pandemic at a time when they had no clue, no way of knowing, no possibility that they could have foresaw that 1 month later to the day, a coronavirus pandemic would actually show up. Interesting timeline. Does it mean anything? Probably nothing. These crazy flat earther conspiracy theorists out here will look at that and they'll get the wrong idea. They'll think I'm trying to imply that maybe the government knew something early. That's not what we're trying to do on this channel. In fact, when I get finished this, I'm going to go get my next booster. Make sure you get yours. In fact, I have an IV right next to the bed, feed it right into my arms, turn it on high. I get a gallon or two every night. Wakes me up, man. Gets me in good shape. I've been doing a lot of weightlifting and working out lately. A couple extra boosters, man. Whew, it's like milk. Makes the body good, right? So don't forget to get yours. You may be behind. So we got that. And then what happens? So let's talk about COVID a little bit and what we learned. It's been said, and I'm going to say this, but I probably won't say it right, but a lot of people have heard this kind of thing, that hard times doesn't change a person and exposes them, right? So it exposed a couple of things. One of the things that I think was exposed was who does and who doesn't trust the government, right? And let me put it this way. When the government says to you, do this or do that, let me give you an example. During COVID, I was doing a show called Fault Lines. A lot of people met me, first heard of me on Fault Lines. And we had this guy, I think it was Dr. Shiva, I believe. I'm pretty sure it was Dr. Shiva. And Dr. Shiva said at that time, he said, look, I think that people should take certain vitamins, vitamin A, D, whatever, right? And I mean, it sounded very reasonable at the time. We had him on, and I think that the government should issue these vitamins to everyone, and people should take the vitamins, and then that'll help a lot, right? And at the time, I said, Dr. Shiva, you got some good points. And these vitamins are important. And, since we found out the importance of vitamin D, right, how important that is in fighting all kinds of stuff, right? But what I said to Dr. Shiva that day was, yeah, it's a good plan. I like it, except one part. He said, what? I said, I ain't putting nothing in my mouth that the government sends me. If they send me vitamin A, B, C, D, and A, E, I, O, and U, and sometimes Y, I ain't getting it. Now, if I ain't taking it, if the government sends me something that says, hey, we would recommend the following vitamins, I'll research it. And I might say, that's a good idea. Not a good idea. I'm going to research it still. But if they send me the vitamins, they ain't going in my mouth because I have a healthy distrust of the government, right? I think there's a lot of people in the chat right now that are saying, yeah, vitamin D is a good idea. But if it's sent to me from old Genocide Joe, hey, here's your package, or even Trump, I don't care who it is. Hey, here's your government package. Take your vitamins. We know, even if it wasn't malicious, even if the government wasn't malicious, they're cheap. They're, people are getting money and getting off of it. There's going to be corruption. There's going to be all kind of stuff going on with the contracts, and you're going to end up getting something that 6 years later there'll be a scandal about. Hey, what about the scandal? Yes, all the people died of government supplied vitamin D. Well, it was because they really gave the contract through Boeing, and Hunter Biden was involved, and the big guy got 10%, and they ended up just grinding up some old weeds that they found on the side of the road and saying it was vitamin D. You know what I mean? That's the way I feel. I ain't taking it. Not happening, right? The government said stand 6 feet apart and do this and that. And at the time, a lot of people like me, I mean, some of the stuff I might have bought into a little bit, but not much. But at the time, I felt like this. Look, I don't trust these bastards. So one of the things that I think COVID did was it separated the wheat from the chaff, shall we say. And I'm saying, I don't really mean that. I'm just being joking. Well, here's what I mean. It separated people who trusted the government from people who didn't. Right? When the government says stand 6 feet apart and it's your best interest. Wear this mask, it's your best interest. Do this, it's in your best interest. Lockdown, it's in your best interest. There are some people who just said, hey, we got to do this because we're going to, in order to stay safe. Remember those words? I'm trying to stay safe. Everybody stay safe. Those of us who don't trust the government had a fundamental problem with that. And here's the fundamental problem. I'm not going to believe that the government's acting in my best interest, the U.S. government. Maybe there are governments that I think probably would act in the best interest of their country, of their citizens. But this ain't one of them. So when the government said stand 6 feet apart, people like me said, why is that? Where did this come from? We want to look and find out where this 6 foot thing came from. Wear this mask. Okay, well, I got to wear it because those are the rules. And the rules said you got to wear a mask in the store. I did it because that was the rules. I wasn't going into the store without, right? I came out, I took it off. When I went in the store, I wore it. The government said do it. Those are the rules. I couldn't go in the store. I needed to buy stuff. I had to do that, right? But I wanted to look into it and say, hey, where does this come from? Because of my fundamental mistrust from the government, I wasn't saying these things don't work. That wasn't where people like me were coming from. We weren't saying they don't work. What we were saying is, we don't trust you. So since you're telling us these things work, can you provide the scientific data? We know there's got to be scientific data, and then we'll be fine. We'll be fine. Provide the scientific data, and we're like, where's the scientific data on the 6 foot rule? Well, now what's his name? Mr. Science, Dr. Science has now said, nah, we didn't really have any. It just seemed like a good idea at the time, right? Well, then we were right. There was no evidence that was going to help us at that time. And so weren't we valid? Wasn't it reasonable in hindsight for us to question government policies and say, where's the scientific foundation for these policies? You're just going to tell us? They could have just said, here's what you do. If you want to stay safe, stand up and flap your arms. Just keep flapping your arms like a dodo bird. And then you'll be safe. We would have said, okay, we can flap our arms like a dodo bird, sure, but I would like to see the scientific evidence behind how that helps me. But I remember seeing a Washington Post cartoon, and it had a tombstone, and on the tombstone it had, he did his own research, implying if you did your own research, you were going to die. Remember, can you believe these crazy people out here doing their own research? Well, what's wrong with that? I can read. People can read. We can do. I know people who have had serious illnesses, cancer, things like that, family members who have looked at, who have, guess what, by law, they went from one doctor said, you should do this. They went to another doctor. I know a person who had some issues with kidneys and medicine they were taking. They go to one doctor. The doctor says, nah, don't change your medicine. They go to another doctor, says, I think that medicine's causing problems with your kidneys. And they end up changing the medicine and their kidney things. What was it? They did their own research. Fact of the matter, if they hadn't, they would have died. Because the doctor that was saying don't, eventually they found out, yeah, the medicine was causing kidney problems, and they switched to another medicine and they were fine. Right? So is it unreasonable? Hey, I'm having kidney problems. You'll be fine. Okay, I look and I say, hey, this is the medicine I take and it can cause kidney problems. I go back to the doctor. You'll be fine. I go to another kidney doctor. What do you think? The doctor says, I think that medicine's causing it. I go back to the first doctor. I went to a kidney doctor and they said they think that medicine's causing it. And then it says, okay, we'll try another medicine and it flattens out. Is that, or did you just die because you did your own research? Example, when my mother was in the hospital one time. She's in the hospital. I come to visit her and she's flipping out. She's like now 89 years old or something at the time. She's going berserk. She's going bananas. She's flipping out. She's acting crazy. I went to the doctor. I'm like, what's wrong with her? Well, old people can be like that. I said, no. My mother just came in yesterday and she was perfectly normal. Perfectly normal. 24 hours later, I come back to visit my mother and she's a crazy person. Something's wrong. Oh, no, just old people can be like that. Give me a list of the medicines she's taken. Have you changed any medicines? Yes, we changed one. Let me see what it is. I researched that medicine and the side effects were the exact things that she was having. Paranoia, this, that. I went to the hospital, back to the hospital. I said, wasn't she already taking a medicine like thyroid or something for that? They said, yeah. I said, switch her back to her old medicine. Well, but we think switch her back to her old medicine, me and my sister. They switched her back to her old medicine. Within 24 hours, she was normal again. She was having side effects from the medicine because this crazy person, this fruitcake, did his own research. And when I did my own, my sister looked and we said, hey, put her back on her own medicine. We're not doctors, but we can read, right? So we were attacked. Told if you do your own research, you're a crazy person during COVID. But if you, how about this? Did you know in most states, the law says if you go to a doctor and he says X, most states, the law says you're entitled to a second opinion. Well, that's doing your own research, isn't it? Getting a second opinion is you go to Dr. Fauci and he says, flap your arms and you say, I want a second opinion. Oh, you're a crazy person. How dare you? Don't you trust science? But the law says I can get a second opinion, which is a form of doing my own research, right? And before I get a second opinion, aren't I going to go online and search and see if I can find anything and then go to another doctor? He tells me a search and then finally I make the decision. The law says I make the decision. But for some reason during COVID, we had to trust the government. And what it revealed was the people who chastise us. Well, Garland, what's wrong with you? You won't go along with what you're being told to do. One thing, I didn't say it to them, but one thing was obvious, wasn't it? One thing was obvious. If the government said, Garland, you need to do X, and I'm like, I'm reticent to do that. You need to be locked down. I was never really locked down. During the lockdowns, bad news, I was out. I was driving places. I'm not the kind of person. I remember one time, one of the things I did during the lockdowns, and it was, I was working from home. I was done work. I was doing that show 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. I was working 3 hours a day, right? And so I remember I'm watching TV and they're like, the hospitals are packed everywhere. They're packed. Their bodies laying around. There's people. It's a madhouse, right? I said, well, you know what? Let me ride around a little bit and take a peep. So I rode to the nearest hospital. I didn't see nothing. It's a ghost town. I said, well, let me ride around. I rode to a whole bunch of different hospitals. I had nothing else to do. I rode to a whole bunch of different hospitals around Baltimore. And everyone I rode to, I'd ride up to the emergency entrance and exit. I didn't see a mayhem. I didn't see a madhouse. I didn't see anything. What was I doing? It was a form of doing my own research. I saw something on TV and I said, let me ride around and see how the reality that I see with my own eyes coincides with it. And at that point, I'm like, that's odd. I would think, what do I know? That when I went to the hospital, it would be friggin' mayhem. And every hospital I went to. And then I had a relative who was a nurse who worked in the COVID ward. And I talked to her and I said, what's happening? She says, they may be laying people off at my hospital because, there ain't a lot to do. And I'm like, oh, really? How packed are you guys? She's like, oh, you got a couple people, not much. This is a true story. I'm not making this up. And I'm like, but on TV, they're saying that the hospitals are packed. It's weird, right? But again, why did I do that? A fundamental mistrust of the government. A fundamental. Now, I'm just saying, these are the things that I experienced. I'm not telling you what they mean. I'm not interpreting this. I'm giving you my experiences. And I'm telling you that my experiences, my research was driven by a fundamental mistrust of the government. And when the government said, and I think that was one of the things that separated people during COVID, I saw that. When the government said, do this, do that, take this, don't take that, whatever they said, and people were like going along. What's wrong with you? You won't go with the government, what they're telling you to do. To me, what it bore out, what it showed me the most was, you trust the government more than me, because I don't trust them at all. And when they say do this or that, I don't have the trust that you have. And here's what I mean with trust. You think clearly if the government says do X and you do it, even lockdowns included, which I was never locked down. I was first visiting people, visiting friends, hanging out, doing all kinds of stuff, right? I was never locked down. I went to the road over to the Eastern Shore, went fishing. Oh, you name it. Man, I was rolling. But what it showed to me is even a lot of people who claim to be dissenters and dissidents and all of that, but when it came down to it and they got scared, they believed that the government was looking out for them, that the government was telling them what to do for their own best, it was acting in their best interest. They still had a belief that the United States government is, when it comes down to it, is going to look out for me, is going to try to protect me, is going to try to make my life better. Wherein those of us who don't have that belief, in fact, we have an opposite belief. There are those of us, I'm speaking to us, I can't speak for you, who see the government as a malicious actor on the world stage, who see a government and says, they'll start a war and they'll send us all off to get killed. They don't give a damn about us. How in the world, think about this, I'm supposed to believe that a government right now that's risking nuclear war, that's risking all of our lives being wiped out, but when it came to COVID, they were looking out for us. Risking World War III, who's a government that in fact is pushing for World War. They're like, we got to go to war with China. Now they've admitted that if they go to war with China, unthinkable death and destruction. There was an article that came out that said Congress did a tabletop exercise that said if they go to war with China, there will be, the world economy will be wrecked. We'll lose tens of thousands of soldiers in the first week, 40,000 soldiers in the first week. All these terrible things that can happen, right? But look what they're doing. But they want to do it anyway. So I'm supposed to believe, and they also know it's likely it'll end up in a nuclear war and most of us will die. I'm supposed to believe, I'm supposed to be so naive that I believe that the same people who are risking all of our lives for some crazy neocon ideology of world hegemony, that the same people who will leave us starving, wandering, homeless in the street. Like, what are they doing about homelessness? Nothing. They don't give a damn if we're all homeless. That will screw us over, destroy our economy for their own greedy selves. That will send our jobs over to China and leave us, and Vietnam and Bangladesh and everywhere else. I ain't blaming China. They sent their jobs. The ruling elite here sent their jobs over China. The ruling elite sent their jobs to China, sent everything to China, and then came to us and said, boy, that China's still screwing you guys. You better be mad at China. And Americans here are stupid enough to blame China. They did it so they could make money. They did it so they could fill their filthy pockets, close everything we had. And not just China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Mexico, sent a lot of them over to Mexico. They wiped out our jobs and our economy, lowered our standard of living, sent their jobs over to China, and then instead of blaming them, we're supposed to blame China if we're stupid enough to do that. There's, again, might I add, people are so stupid that when the government says to them, China is evil and they're out to get you, they trust the government. Oh, really? Yeah, you're right. Joe Biden says, think about it. Biden and his crew right now, what are they telling us? China's bad. China's out to get you. China's evil. And the same idiots who believed Russiagate, the same idiots who believed that the government was out to try to help us when it came to COVID, now believe the government when they tell us China's evil and they're trying to get us. What's even worse? Here's what's even worse. There are people that didn't believe Russiagate. Nah, Russiagate's a bunch of hooey. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's clearly it's garbage, it's trash, it's deep state lies, right? And when it came to COVID, they're like, yeah, when it comes to COVID, I don't think the government's looking out on their best interest. I don't trust them. But now, for some reason, they think the government, the same people that lied to them about Russiagate, The same people that lied to them about COVID, for some reason, they think they're telling them the truth about China. Yes, sir, China's evil. They're out to get us. Oh, we got to stop those Chinese. Why won't the government do something about China? As if the government is going to do something about China to look out for you. I mean, the naivety and stupidity of people is stunning to me at times. That a person can see a malicious, sociopathic, narcissistic liar continue to lie to you. But when it comes to China, yeah, they're telling the truth on that one. They never tell the truth. It ain't who they are. It ain't what they do. You are exposing your stupidity. If you believe them, if you believe them on Russiagate, if you believe them on COVID, if you believe them on China, you are the one who really are exposing your stupidity. They're all lies. They're all lies. I know people that are still hiding under their bed. Hey, what's going on? Want to go somewhere? Oh my God, no. Why? COVID. I'll just say this. The last couple of times I had COVID, and the last time I had COVID, now I ain't saying what people should or shouldn't do. I never got the jab, but I can tell you this. I have plenty of family members who've got the jab and done everything they're supposed to do and wore the masks when they were supposed to wear it. It did everything they were supposed to do. I've had COVID twice. And they've had COVID 2 to 3 times. Not much difference. The last time I had COVID, it was nothing. I'm not saying that it's not still dangerous and people can't get it in other variants. All those things can be true. I'm just saying the last time I had COVID, it was barely a headache. 24 hours, it was gone. I might have had it another time. I'm not sure. But if that was COVID, it was a head cold. It was a bad head cold and a lot of mucus built up. Here's the thing about it. It could have been COVID. It could have been a bad cold. I don't know. I didn't even bother to check because it just seemed like a head cold. I was blowing my nose and sneezing a lot, but it could have been COVID theoretically, I guess. I don't know, or it was a bad cold, but that's where we are now. If I'm at a point where the only way I can figure out if it's COVID or a bad cold is to get tested, I'm not bothering with getting tested. Because at that point, what am I getting tested for? I wouldn't get tested if I thought I had a bad cold. So unless it presents as something other than a bad cold, I ain't getting tested. And unless I put it like this, I don't go to the hospital unless I have a reason. I've twisted my ankle a little bit. Oh gosh, I got a twisted ankle. And then I just hobble around for a while until it gets better. If I break my ankle, oh, it's hurting real bad, I think I better go. If it rises to a degree that I need to go to get something checked on because it might be broken, I'm going to go. But if it just feels like a twisted ankle, I'll walk it off, as they say, right? Same with illness. If I have a respiratory illness and it feels like a cold, I've done that my whole life. Whatever. Why am I going to bother to go for a cold? If it starts getting worse and I think I got pneumonia, I'm going in and get checked. That's what I should do. So I'm not getting tested for something unless it rises to a degree that I feel a threat to my health. I don't think that was one of the questions a lot of people had during COVID. You tested everybody. Did it help? Did I help our numbers? I don't know. I have no idea. But here's my point. These were legitimate questions. And one of the things that I saw that happened, and I'll add this during COVID, was the government response was heavy-handed. I'll still remember this. I read an article when they were telling people to get the jab, asking people. And the article said, well, we've tried the carrot. Now it's time for the stick. I'll never forget that. And I thought, that sounds fascist to me. What they're saying now is we've tried to ask you to do something, and now we're going to order you and make it painful, right? Well, it's like this. I've always said this. If you ask me, Garland, will you give me a ride to the store? That's a question. If I say no, and then you get angry, why not? It was never a question. It was never a question. It was an order. If you say, Garland, will you give me a ride to the store? And I say, nah, I don't feel like it. You go, okay, well, I'll catch an Uber or ask somebody else. Okay, fine. But if you ask me to do something for you and I say no and you get mad, that means you never gave me the option in the first place. You expected me to do it or you were going to punish me for it. If you be careful, when you ask somebody to do a favor and they say no, just say, okay. If you are ordering somebody, make it clear at first. I expect you to do this for me. And there are times when a wife can say to her husband, hey, honey, I need this, and I expect you to do it. You're my husband or wife or whatever the case may be, right? When a mate, a spouse, a child, a father, look, son, I expect you to do this. And you should tell them. When you have something that you expect the person to do, and there may be consequences if they don't ask them. Let them know, look, I need you to do this for me. Don't say, will you do this? And the person says, well, I don't feel like it. How dare you? You weren't clear to you pretended it was a question and it wasn't. It was kind of a demand. And if someone says to their wife or husband, hey, look, I need you to give me a ride to work. Okay, I need you to give me a ride over to my sister's. I need you to do this. And hey, I need you to help me carry this. I need you to do something. I need you to do that. You're letting them know it's not a question that is important to you. And then if they say, oh, you can say, hey, come on, I gave you a ride to your sister's house last week. Now you won't give me a ride to my sister's house. You have a right to give them a hard time. But if you just say, would you do me a favor? And the person says no, and you give them a hard time, it was never a question. My point being this, when they said, okay, we've tried the carrot, now it's the stick, what they were saying was we were always on an authoritarian mindset. We just wanted to pretend first that we weren't to see if you would go along with it. And if you won't, we're going to beat the hell out of you till you do. We're going to punish you. And what did we see? We saw the same imperial actions that they use around the world. What do they do around the world? What do they do? Economic sanctions. You'll lose your job if you don't do what we tell you to do. Other sanctions, you won't be able to travel. We'll shut down your bank account. These are all economic sanctions. What we saw is the war on terror came home. The war of terror came home. The war of terror of going around the world sanctioning people. And they came home. They said, we'll sanction our own citizens. Economic sanctions. You can't do anything unless we tell you to do it. It became clear that our government was very authoritarian. They were already authoritarian, but this just cemented that reality. And there are a lot of people, again, who to this day still trust them. And see, that's the biggest thing that I got out of it, that there's some people that trust the government a whole hell of a lot more than I do. And when they talk about COVID, they talk about COVID from the perspective of the government's policies were good policies, or if they were, think about this. What do we hear about Vietnam? Well, they tried to do the right thing, but it went bad. Isn't that what we hear about these liberal interventions around the world? Well, we tried to help the people in that country, but it didn't work out better. So we ended up killing 400,000 of them, maiming them, starving them. We meant to do well. It just didn't turn out well. That's what imperialism says around the world. That's what they lie to us. We were going there to help the people in Iraq, to help the people in Syria, to help the people in Libya, to help the people in Africa. Really, it just so happened that while we were there, we just happened to steal their resources and overthrow their government, assassinate their leaders, and murder them. But it was all in good faith. It just didn't work out the way we planned. Well, you're an idiot if you believe that. I didn't believe it when it comes to foreign policy. And how can you know our government's foreign policy, understand the malice in the imperialist mindset of the people who run our government and think, oh, yeah, well, I think they're trying to do the right thing in Haiti. No, they're not. People are like, well, I know they're doing a genocide in Gaza, but I think when it comes to Ukraine, they're really trying to stand for democracy and help the people. You got to be an idiot. That ain't how it works. That's not how it works. They're doing evil things all over everywhere they do the evil things, including here. And there are still, that's what I saw, people who bought into what they were being told. I looked at other countries. I'm like, well, it's interesting that when I look at Africa, the Africans are like, yeah, we're just going to chill out here, bro. We ain't even going to go with this. And the Africans had much better numbers than we did. Sweden, we were told Sweden did nothing. It's not their culture. Sweden, like, we ain't locking down. We're not doing the mask. We're not doing anything. And I remember at the time, what were we told? Sweden's done. Oh, they'll be all wiped out. Every last one of them. You better call your Swedish friends now because they're all going to be killed by COVID. And I watched it, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe things won't work out so well for the Swedes. They didn't do lockdowns. Belarus did nothing. They told us that Lukashenko was a madman. They had like this. I remember when we were locked down, they had this yearly festival where like tens of thousands of people to come out to celebrate some victory in World War II, right? And we were like, oh my God, they're insane. At a time like this, how could they're all gonna die. They all didn't die. They didn't. They had better numbers than us. The Russians, what, they locked down for a week or two, and then they're like, to hell with this. Nah, we're going back to what we're doing. So you look around the world and you see all of these countries that just didn't go along with it, and they seem to have similar or better numbers. So I came to the conclusion at some point that, well, hell, if the countries that locked down had either similar or better, sometimes a little better, sometimes a little worse numbers than the countries that did, then locking down didn't seem to do that much. It didn't produce the effects based on comparison of countries around the world that we were told it was going to produce. And for people like me who didn't trust the government, um, we weren't shocked because all along we had questions. And now, when I ran that timeline by you, one could look at that timeline and come to some very interesting conclusions, could they not? I'm just saying. I don't know what conclusions they could come to, but they could come to some interesting conclusions. The conclusion, but I didn't come to a new conclusion. I had already come to my conclusion prior to this. And the conclusion that I come to is I don't trust the US empire. I didn't trust the government under Trump. I don't trust it under Biden, under Obama, under whoever the hell is next. It ain't under Biden right now. Have you seen this guy recently? He's got issues. Before I go, let me find this real quick. Let me see if I can find this. You got to see this. If they'll ever let me show it. So Biden was at some Juneteenth celebration thing, right? Let's see if we can get to it. Okay, it's skip ad. Oh, let me see. So he's at some Juneteenth celebration, and I'm in a very few short seconds, I will show you this guy. Okay, here we go. Let's see if we can get it. All right. Oh, here we go. Okay. So he's at a Juneteenth celebration. Let's look at this. This is our fearless leader. Let's see if we got sound. Oh, we got to get sound. You guys ready? This is our fearless leader.
She knows so long as she was denied, our freedom can never be secured. She knows so long as she was denied, our freedom can never be secured. She knows so long as she was denied, our freedom can never be secured. She knows so long as she was denied, our freedom can never be secured.
There you go. That's the guy. That's the guy. She no lost. She no was denied. Our freedom can never be secured. The hell was that? I got a funny feeling that they're going to find a way to get Joe Biden out of the June 27th debate with Trump. How the hell does this guy debate anybody? How does this guy debate anybody, right? This is the guy right here. This is the guy. How's this guy debate Trump? Tell me. How's he debate Trump?
She knows so long as she was denied, our freedom can never be secured. She knows so long as she was denied, our freedom can never be secured.
It's time for me to go. She no lost, denied. Our freedom can never be secured. I'm supposed to believe that guy's in charge. I'm supposed to believe that guy's the president of the United States. He's making critical decisions every day. He's in the war room. He's in this room. He's in that room. He's got Bidenomics because he's the one who plans the economy. This guy's doing stuff, man. He's doing stuff. I'll leave you with this. Share this on all your social media platforms. Uh, if you can afford it, certainly, I certainly would appreciate it if you can go to Cash App or Buy Me a Coffee is always great. PayPal, any of those, if you can support the channel, I appreciate it. If you can't, that's fine. Just share this on all your social media platforms. Thanks. Have a nice day. Oh, let me look. I forgot. Are there any super chats? I do want to say that if there's any super chats, we'll answer them. There's always a lot of good questions from super chats. Always a lot of good super chat questions, but I don't see any today. Oh, here we go. Red chili pepper. Thank you very much, Red Chili Pepper. Let's keep going. Anybody else? Any questions from the supery chatties? And nothing. Well, thanks a lot, everybody. Certainly appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. Share this on all your social media platforms. Make sure you go to Rumble and follow me there. Make sure you go to rockfin.com and become a member. Peace. I'm out.